Welcome back, everyone. Now, the conversations that matter, the insights you need. This is The Pulse, and I'm Francine Lacqua here in London. Now, Indonesia has offered to buy more American commodities, including oil, as it seeks to rebalance trade with the U.S. Indonesia has emerged as one of the 18 countries being prioritized for trade talks by the Trump administration. With us now, Anindya Bakrie, the chair of the Indonesia Chamber of Commerce and Industry, but also chief executive of the Indonesian conglomerate Bakrie and Brothers. Thank you so much for coming back on The Pulse, Mr. Bakrie.
Thank you very much, Francine, for having me here.
You've just come back also from the state dinner in Qatar. We're looking at pictures that were really quite extraordinary. I mean, this is a big week in the agenda of President Trump, but also in the Middle East, where deals were signed and there seems to be a much more normalization. What do you take away from Qatar?
I think, first of all, it was a very good state dinner, but everybody came away with a positive vibe, right? You see a lot of trades being talked about, investments, you see the headlines, but most importantly, the peace and stability in the region, in the Middle East, I think will be achieved. And that's very important for the world. Especially us, Indonesians, we come from Southeast Asia. Next week we're going to have ASEAN, which is the Southeast Asian organization. So looking at that, I think people are looking forward to much better second half, and of course going forward as well.
I imagine Indonesian business wants stability, like all businesses around the world. And there was a sense in the last 5 weeks that President Trump's policies were a little bit unpredictable. Do you feel after this week in the Middle East, but also talks with China, that we have more of a stable footing, that we understand more what the future looks like in terms of business?
Yeah. So, for example, Francine, 2 weeks ago, I was in the United States. We met our counterparts, U.S. Chamber of Commerce, U.S. ASEAN Business Council, Business Roundtable, and even National Council of Wheat, Soybean, Meat, Dairy, just to understand what they think about these tariff possibilities, right? They actually feel they really want to do a deal very quick, because any tariffs increase will, of course, bring inflation to them. So I think they will put a lot of pressure to the government, and I feel it when I was there. Now, from our side, the total trade with the U.S. is about $40 billion. And the U.S. is the second biggest trade partner of Indonesia, the first being China, about $130 billion. The surplus of $18 billion goods can be mitigated, as you mentioned, as we can import more oil and gas derivatives from the U.S. But I think what's interesting, in 2 to 3 years, we can actually double that 40 to become $80 billion. We will import a lot of soybean, wheat, cotton, also meat, dairy, but we want to export a lot of the same things, such as electronics, furniture, footwear, garment. But what's also interesting, as we are talking anyhow in the next 45 days, what we see, the government is also putting critical minerals into the mix. And that's interesting, because, that will be a nice investments, co-investments opportunity between the two countries. And lastly, I want to say, Indonesia just launched the Sovereign Wealth Fund around 2 months ago. $900 billion AUM, so we can also co-invest somewhere in the value chain with the U.S. So a lot of things have changed and triggered from these current tariff discussions.
I mean, things have changed for the worse, or actually for the better? I understand, again, this is an ongoing negotiation. It's interesting that critical minerals, energy, and manufacturing will be impacted. Yeah. But does it change your supply chains? How does it change, the fabric of business?
Yeah. First of all, I'm speaking on behalf of the private sector, right? The government will do what is right for the both governments. But what I feel is that it unlocks a lot of the possibilities for Indonesia on many fronts. So, for example, before we are exporting, the garment, electronics, furniture, and so on. Now we're talking about processing critical minerals. People understand that we have the largest nickel reserve, top 5 in terms of gold, copper, and so on in terms of bauxite and tin, right? So we can process it halfway. Other than also sending it to the east, we can also sending it to the west. The second thing also, the co-investment opportunities. We have about dividends as a country into the Sovereign Wealth Fund, about $10 billion unlevered. Now we can also think about upstream opportunities, for example, in the U.S., while the U.S. can also invest in the downstreaming plan of Indonesia. And lastly, what I would like to also mention is that the trades can make both countries go up the value chain, but we want to be very careful, because we we want to be very much balanced, right? We are doing a lot of businesses with everywhere in the world, with China. We joined BRICS, for example. We are in the accession of OECD. So Indonesia now, hopefully, will be Indonesia better in the future.
I know the French president is coming, I think, at the end of May to Indonesia for a state visit.
Yes.
How does your relationship with Europe changes because of what's happening with U.S. trade?
So, for example, President Macron is coming at the end of the month, but also the Premier of China also come to Indonesia at the end of the month. So you see how Indonesia is trying to, just like how Qatar is in the Middle East, for example, Indonesia as the biggest country in ASEAN, Southeast Asia, the only one representing G20, we want to play a role, but ultimately we want to bring welfare to our people, but also to the world.
Can you do both? I mean, if you try and be in the middle, how difficult is it to have a good relationship with China if you're trying to negotiate with Donald Trump?
Actually, Francine, if you think about it, number one trading partner is China, number two, the U.S. The U.S. wants it balanced, and we support, and we want to increase it 2 or 3 times. So maybe, net, we can also benefit. But again, I'm not here to say everything is easy, right? Inflation is okay for Indonesia. We're at 2 to 3% max.
Enviable for most countries.
Yes, thank you. But if the world is having inflation, our trading partners are having inflation. It's not good for anybody.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us on air today. That was Anindya Bakrie, the chair of the Indonesian Chamber of Commerce.